This is Rebel Therapist, a podcast for entrepreneurs who are trained as therapists and who want to level up their businesses, make a bigger impact, feel fulfilled, and be very well paid. I'm your host, Annie Schusler. Hi there, this is a bonus episode. During this pandemic, therapists and healers are figuring out how to get themselves online to keep serving their clients. I know you're struggling and you're finding ways to get through and find a new normal. I decided to reach out to someone who has a lot of help to offer us in making this particular transition. I want to introduce Alethea Pimenta. I had the honor of working with Alethea as she was developing her coaching services for therapists. So I know her. She's such a thoughtful leader, and she's a calm voice in the middle of a lot of panic right now. Alethea is a psychotherapist with a full online cash pay private practice. She coaches other therapists who are feeling burnt out to transition to cash pay online practices. So let's jump in with my conversation with her. Welcome, Alethea. Thank you so much for being here on such short notice.
Thank you so much, Annie. I'm so happy to be here.
So it's a really big process to convert all of your services and all of your marketing and everything to an online practice. Mm-hmm. And so if someone wants to do that, I'm thinking that it's going to be a process beyond this episode, and they might consider checking out your work and working with you more deeply. But today, I just really wanted to help people focus in on the changes that they can make right now and to focus in on what they might be struggling with right now. But can we back up a little bit and have you talk to us about why is it so important to you, even before this crisis, why is it so important to you to help therapists create online practices? And what has it meant to your life to be able to work online?
Yeah, that's such a great question, because I have to speak for this for myself first. So I actually had an in-person practice. It was right downtown. I'm in a really saturated area, but I loved having my office. I loved being able to go in. And then I had my daughter. And at the same time, I was kind of, my intuition was saying that my husband's job, he'd had this fantastic job for ages, and I could just feel like something is happening. This isn't going to work out. I'm not sure what, but my gut feeling is that something is not so great here. And I could kind of see, there's like some trouble happening at work. I also knew okay, if this job goes away, we are probably going to need to relocate. We're probably going to need to move. We are going to have to switch cities. My husband might be out of work. I have a newborn. And I had decided that I was going to be taking some time off as a self-employed person. So, having all of that kind of happening, right? Like nothing had actually happened. My husband wasn't laid off. Nothing had really happened, but I could just see what? All of these things are going to happen, and I'm going to be in a place where I might have to be the sole breadwinner, and I might have to do that in a new city. And that sounded so daunting to me. That sounded so difficult and so daunting. And actually, a lot of this kind of happened just because I wanted to be able to start work, be able to be close by to my daughter so that I could be with her. I could hold her in between clients, in between sessions. And actually, that's what happened. By the time she was 6 months, I had already kind of built up my practice again. It was fully online. My husband did, in fact, lose his job. And we did, in fact, have to relocate to a city outside of where we were. But during all of that, I was able to keep my clients steady. I was able to keep my income steady, and I was able to support my family. And so the thing that has really stayed with me is that, there was so much uncertainty there. And as somebody who is self-employed, sometimes you do have to be the one who has to look after your family. Sometimes you do have to be the one, even if you're moving, to still be able to work again. And so I have been really drawn to helping therapists who, as self-employed people, as entrepreneurs, as moms, have needed so much flexibility. And a lot of them have had to travel. A lot of them have needed to relocate. A lot of them have needed to just, know hey, right now I'm stable, I'm here, but maybe in a little bit of time, I'm going to need to move, right? So having this online practice has really given me a lot of flexibility to know that I can do the thing that I'm really passionate about without having to feel like I have to start from zero again. And that's the kind of support that I like to offer other therapists to kind of, really equip them to say like, hey, we can do all of these things right now. We can build this online practice, or we can even just like grow a little bit online so that you don't have to suddenly feel like you're going to be left with nothing if any of these major things happen.
And how old is your child now?
You know what? She just turned 2.
Okay. So you've made this huge transition and you've helped other people make this transition over these couple of years. And now I'm thinking about there are so many people who are figuring this out on the fly. Like
Yeah.
before this pandemic had been kind of resisting the idea of online therapy, sometimes for good reason, sometimes out of fear. And a lot of that has just gone out the window. So making the bigger transition is obviously a bigger deal of really bringing your whole practice online and becoming location independent. What do you think therapists need to keep in mind who are going to do this like this week or next week in terms of just making a kind of a quick transition?
Mm-hmm. Hey, so, like the first thing that I would like to start in with, right, even before we go into the tech, or even before we go into, what you need to think through, is just kind of, going back to like, what is it that you need, right? And thinking through like, what is it that you need in terms of just thinking through what kind of support do you need and what kind of support do you need to have in place, right? So even being able to just make the decision that, as of this date, I am going to go fully online. Because the thing that I noticed is that when we are kind of a little bit hesitant and we're saying like, hey, you can have the option to go online, or maybe I'm not fully going online yet, clients prefer to kind of hold on to what they have. So I think it really helps to be able to become really clear about what it is that you need first before even thinking about what you're able to offer your clients, or even thinking about, okay, I've had this, practice here in this physical location, and now can I just move it over? Right. So before you're just going to like copy and paste over, I would say like, hey, I want you to think through what is it that you need at home, right? Are your kids at home now? Are you going to be able to have the space to do back-to-back sessions? Are you going to be able to have to think through maybe having shorter sessions? Or are you going to have to think through, if you've always wanted to work 8 to 4, 9 to 4, and you've kind of thought, like, no, I have to kind of stick to evenings because that's what people do or people need, right? Like this could be the time to try out some of those new things and just to see like what is that you need, because this could actually be the time to do those scheduling changes. Because if so many people are working from home, it is so much easier right now to ask somebody like, hey, can you meet me during the daytime, right? Because there's a lot more flexibility. I find that I was able to switch from having a practice that was, was like 3 to 9 most days to now I work 8 to 4 Monday to Wednesday. And I can do that now. And I encourage my therapist to say like, hey, you can do that too, because when you're working online, someone can be working from home and they're not missing that travel time.
Okay. I love that, Alethea. So it's the idea of take a step back, take a breath, and think about, instead of just kind of panicking and switching everything over, to look at, all right, this isn't just getting through this week. This is, for a lot of us, this is a much longer period of time. And to look for what is the opportunity for me to take care of myself, to take care of my family, to make a really thoughtful decision. I think that's fantastic. Yeah.
And I think you said that beautifully, right? Because it's like, before we think about the commitments that we have to make to our clients, we have to think right now, especially of like, what are the things we're already committed to, right? What are our family obligations? What kind of space are we going to be able to do work out of, right? And then also to be able to see the opportunity, right? Like if you've wanted to do longer sessions and you feel like, I don't know if it works for this person, they're so busy, they have to travel, right? Like this could be the time because there's no commute time anymore, right? There's so much more opportunity actually right now possible. If there are things that you've been thinking about doing, or if there are ways that you were kind of, curious about working through, this could be the time to actually like, have that conversation with clients, because they're really understanding, they're kind of in a similar place as you.
And so, yeah, what are some of the first things that once people have done that thinking through, what are some of the first things that they need to put in place?
So, you need to have your tech figured out. You need to be able to figure out, what is the platform that you're going to use that meets the regulations for your college, for your licensing. the one that I see most therapists using is either Doxyme or Zoom. I find that really helpful. And I also find that, a lot of clients are kind of familiar with Zoom, or they've used that kind of call system before. The other thing I'm noticing is that, a lot of EHRs are now including a platform where you can securely message and contact your clients. So those things are kind of built in, right? I know that some people kind of feel like, hey, what's the tech and which tech should I kind of go into? And maybe I'm not that tech savvy. And, the thing that I like to refocus on, right, is like our technical competence is our emotional intelligence. And that's the thing that our clients are wanting from us, right? This is the medium that we're doing it in, but actually the thing that we're still good at, right? Like our competency, our technical competency is processing, is holding the space, right? So I would say like, hey, the platforms all kind of do similar things, pick one and then know that either there's going to be a bit of a learning curve, right? But then the main thing after that, I would say is, hey, I want you to think about, who you are in a space with another person. And I want you to, kind of really give yourself time to say like, who am I? Like, what is my energy like? What are the things that I normally like to do with clients, right? Because when I was just seeing clients, kind of in between, if they were traveling, I would see them online. I didn't really feel that good about my online work as in person. But when I made the transition to be fully online, I really had to sit and think through, hey, how am I going to do these interventions online? Like I'm a Gestalt trained therapist, so we do body work, we're art, drama. I was like, how am I going to think about doing these things online so that I can still feel like I'm really doing the kind of therapy that I'm called to? And here's the place again, what I would say, hey, like there can be so much information, right, about how to go online, but I would actually ask you to hold for a sec and actually have some time to think through, what is it that you need and how can you actually do your work online in terms of your interventions. If you're working with couples, what support or what changes might you need to do to kind of support yourself to being online? Because I think this really gets into the next part, which is, can you feel good about charging for your work online? Or can you feel good that clients are going to refer to you online, right? So I feel like, once you've figured out the tech stuff, once you've figured out the legal and the ethical parts, right? And even this with therapists, you say like, hey, if you've had an in-person practice, you've probably already had policies in place that respect your client's confidentiality. There's already practices in place probably that you're doing that already look after the ethics, right? I know suddenly it can seem really daunting. It can seem like there's so much more. But, once you've figured out your platform, once you've figured out how you're going to be contacting and connecting with your clients, right? The next big thing is like, can you figure out how you're going to be able to like be in the space with them again?
This makes me think about a conversation I've been having with some colleagues this week is to really be transparent with clients about this transition. And instead of trying to seem like, if you're not used to online counseling, instead of trying to seem like you're used to it, to just be really upfront about like, this is different. Let's think about what this is like. Let's look at how we can make this work best. And like to look at where should we have the camera so that we're as close as we want to be, and just to really like not try to be anything except what we really are in that moment.
Yeah, I feel like, being able to focus on that, even, because like what we're saying is like, hey, can you give yourself permission to show up in the moment, right? Because the frustration that I hear from therapists is that, I'm working with my clients or I'm working with my couple and I can feel like, I'm not connecting as quickly or I'm not able to catch it, right? Like sometimes even something as simple as, sometimes there's freezing, right? And so like I'm missing what my client is saying, right? And being able to kind of slow down for yourself. And, it's not like you're picking up from what you were doing in person to here, but it's like, you almost have to give yourself some time and to be able to collaborate with your client and say like, hey, like if this call keeps freezing, like I'm going to call you, it's going to be on speakerphone. I know it might seem a little clunky, but, we're going to do that. Right. So yeah, completely.
Excellent. Something I've even done is when the computer, when the visual is freezing, to get on speakerphone, but to keep the camera on and just mute it so that we've got as much as we can of both.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. 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 And like that's really the thing, because it's really challenging us to feel like, how is it that we can connect, right? How is it that we can connect with another person when we're not physically there? And, I think sometimes the thing that we forget is like our technical competency, like our real thing that we're doing all the time is presence and processing. And, like maybe we're like our standards are so high because we're really on it, right? But like our clients can still feel our level of care, our level of presence and support.
Yeah. And maybe part of that is about calming ourselves down through the little tech glitches, that if we can stay present for ourselves and not panic, that we're going to be able to stay present for our clients. I know. And you and I even had like a couple of tech glitches in starting this episode. And like,
yeah,
I think we're both so used to that we were able to just like roll with it and stay calm. But I know when I was new to getting on video, that would have probably frozen me. Like that probably would have freaked me out.
Yeah. Yeah, that it's definitely all those things, right? I had to call my husband and be like, tech support, please, because like what's happening? But I really like what you're saying because, I think sometimes like the trend that I'm noticing is that there is this kind of sense of, I need to learn all this telehealth stuff, or I need to like figure out how to do all of this. And there's a lot of great training. And I would say is like, hey, before you're going into all of that, right, before you're doing all of this download, I would say like, hey, think through, right? Like what are the things or the elements that help you feel grounded in your physical space? And can you create some of that for yourself, right? And I also want to say, like when our clients are calling in to see us, they don't need to see this big office, right? If you live in a city like I did, like I did not have a ton of space, right? There was a desk and there was a blank wall behind me. And so, you don't have to have this big office set up, but what can you do in terms of, is it like having a plant, having some photographs, what is it that you can do to ground yourself? Because sometimes it can feel like, yeah, I'm not connecting with my client, or, I'm having a hard time, really connecting with them. And then I kind of have to ask the person to check back into like, hey, are you feeling grounded, right? Are you able to kind of just, stay curious and see what's happening between the two of you?
So I'm going to let people know how to find you. What, because I think there's so much more. I think it can go so much deeper, this entire conversation. What is something that's working for you personally right now to get to a new normal during this pandemic? And it could be related to your work or even not.
Yeah. So, one of the big things that has come up for me, right? Like the minute I heard all of this, like, even though I'm online, there's two things. So the first is like, even though I'm online, even though I've been, cash pay, private pay, doing my thing for a while, when this happened, I was like, oh, wait a minute. Am I going to have to like, like what's going to happen? Like, am I going to lose clients? Like, is this? And then I had to slow down and say like, hold on a sec. Are these old fears or is this a new fear? Right. And I was like, yeah, some of this sounds like some of your old fears. Right. And so that's been really helpful. And even when I'm talking with other therapists, right, sometimes, some therapists are saying like, hey, I'm really helping a lot, but maybe I feel a little bit guilty, in like charging and taking this money when other people are, struggling so much. Like I'm actually doing well. In reminding therapists to say like, hey, can you just slow down and check, right? Like if you are experiencing these fears, even if it's around telehealth, even if it's around what's happening right now in general, right? Can you just check and see if there's any theme here that you've been experiencing in the past, right? And if that's the case, then you can kind of look at it and say like, hey, this is some of my old stuff coming up, right? And then once you know that, you can say, okay, now what's the reframe, right? And so then the reframe can be like, okay, so what's the opportunity here? But if you're not able to kind of catch that this is some old stuff, I feel like it can kind of feel really overwhelming that you have to do this whole new thing, and you maybe are not ready. So I feel like that's kind of that has been like personally very helpful for me.
Can you give me an example of like old stuff that might come up for someone?
Yeah, for sure. Right. So if you have made the choice to be off insurance, to charge a fee that you can afford to live on and afford to look after your family, and all of a sudden, even though your clients might be fine, and even though you might be working well, right, all of a sudden you feel kind of guilty or kind of icky about feeling like, hey, I'm able to look after myself and my family, but I know so many other people are not, right? And instead of thinking about like, should I offer a sliding scale, or should I do this or should I do that, or like what other supports can I offer people, or thinking about, just kind of feeling a little guilty, right? I think it's really important to remember like why you set your fee or why you set some of your policies or procedures in the first place, right? And you have to go back to thinking through that, because then you have to be able to say like, yeah, those were there so that I can look after myself, right? But at a time like this, it can kind of feel a little bit uncomfortable, or a little bit, you might feel a little bit guilty, right?
That makes so much sense. Yes, yes. Yeah. So looking at when have I had this feeling before, whether it's guilt or scarcity, or, there may be like actually a time where you've been through the same set of emotions over a different circumstance in your business. Yeah. That's totally true.
Yeah. And I wanted to say one thing, because I know there are a lot of people who are listening to this. And the one thing that I would say is like, this is an opportunity to work with clients and even take on new clients. And the one thing that I would say as a suggestion to therapists is, consider doing some version of your first contact with clients online, because sometimes I'm an online therapist. It says that on my website. It says that on my site today. And even as recent as this week, I still get people who will call who are like, hey, I read your profile, sound great. Where are you located? I prefer to be in person. And so, it's not just like, online therapists, people already know that you're online. Even though I'm already online, people still call in asking to see me in person. And the thing that I have found to be the smoothest to transition people to online is to actually have the first contact that I have with them, which is like, a little 20-minute check-in. And I've started doing that on my online platform, because then clients are not like, how is that going to work? Because normally we're either, depending if you're on the phone or if you're going through email, when they're able to just kind of see me, right? And they don't have to think through like, how is the online part going to work? Then they're like, oh yeah, this is great. Like this already works, right? And then we can just assess whether they're a good fit or not.
Yeah. So just start with that. Instead of starting with a phone call, if possible, just start with that right away. So Alethea, what do you have coming up for people to get more of you? I know you have a webinar coming up next week.
Yeah, I have a webinar that I'm doing March 26th, 10:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And it's really a webinar to be able to kind of, slow down and just work through some of the things that I either think of when I'm screening my clients, some of the things that I think of when I am thinking about, how am I going to get good client outcomes? And just being able to support other therapists who have to act, the thing that when you think about marketing, you have to really think about how am I going to be able to do good work? And so I'm really hoping to be able to share some of the best practices of what I do online to other therapists. But yeah, that's going to be happening next week, March 26th. And I am going to be hoping to do like maybe a series of those.
Thank you so much, Alethea. And again, I really appreciate you being willing to just jump on with me at the last minute and help all the Rebel therapists out there in this way.
It was my pleasure.
To sign up for that webinar on Thursday, March 26th, and to learn more about Alethea, head over to growyouronlinepractice.com. I'll be hosting another free community call just for therapists and healers about finding a new normal during the pandemic on Thursday, April 2nd at 11 a.m. Pacific time. So we're just going to get together and think and feel through this. I'm going to share my thoughts, and you're going to have an opportunity to hear from each other. So just go over to rebeltherapist.me to sign up for that free community workshop. I want to thank Cosmo Palms for editing this podcast and Brianne Rising for taking great care of our guest, and to both of them for being so flexible during this pandemic. And thank you so much for listening, and please take care. You're going to get your next regularly scheduled episode on Tuesday. I'll see you then. Wait, hold on 1 second, Alethea. I'm gonna grab my dog because something has gone crazy out there. I'll be right back.